This is Ben Pullinger. Ben is 42, he's South African born and raised, but these days lives in Toronto. Ben loves the beach, he loves to cook, he loves to chill out with his family, but most of all, Ben loves rocks. Ben's chief executive of ATEX Resources, and we've caught him doing the thing he loves best, talking geology on site at the Valeriano project in the Huasca province of northern Chile, along the Porphyry superhighway of the Americas. Over the next little while, we'll take you inside a project shaping up as a generational copper discovery. As we look deeply to understand Valeriano, the copper project, we're exploring whether Ben, a first-time CEO, is the right man to lead ATEX given the significance of the project and the gravitas of its stakeholders. Do investors like Ben?
I think so.
I see in Ben the new generation of leaders that mining need.
You know, it's kind of a rare thing to find in its space.
Am I confident? 100%.
This is the best project I've been involved
in. Having followed Ben around physically and virtually for the past few months, it's abundantly clear he's a geologist. But his career with rocks wasn't preordained. Like many in the industry, it happened more by chance. When did you know that you loved rocks?
I mean, I think every young boy loves rocks, loves playing in the dirt at some point, but it was honestly, I don't even know that geology was really a profession. Like, I love geography, I love chemistry, I love all those things, but it was only kind of like when I started thinking about going to university and trying to figure out what I was going to do that I ended up just by a random accident doing a BSc in the science department. And then the first guy that I spoke to in the science department turned out to be a guy who's now passed away, but he was one of the most legendary A grade professors in carbonate shelf geology, and there was Professor Nick Bjerkes, and he sat me down. He's like, "Hey, do you like adventure? Do you like to travel the world? Do you like this?" And within half an hour, he convinced me to do a geology degree. And from that day forward, I never looked back. I've worked from the middle of the Amazon jungle to the top of the Himalayas, to all over northern Canada. I've got hypothermia, been blown up. I've dealt with terrorist attacks, all the fun stuff. And along the way, been part of finding some pretty amazing discoveries, with Valeriano now being by far one of the best things I've ever seen in my career.
ATEX chairman Craig Nelson knew Ben through another role and suggested he come out to Chile to take a look at Valeriano.
At that time, we just completed drilling hole 17,
which ultimately ended up delivering more than 1,300 meters, grading 0.83% copper equivalent, with 550 meters at more than 1%. An intersect one insider described as being as
close to geoporn as you could get.
Ben took the job on the spot as VP Exploration and Business Development.
And when I got there, we're in the middle of this like this potassium altered chalcopyrite enriched, veiny, just beautiful rock. And I remember just looking up and down and just being like, it's going up and down these core trays as far as the eye can see. And it was like 400 or 500 meters of it already. And just thinking to myself, I've been chasing veins my whole life. And when you're drilling, looking at gold deposits and stuff, if you find a 10-meter wide vein in a 1,000-meter hole, you're doing pretty well. This is a 1,300-meter hole in which 1,000 meters, a kilometer, and it's like hard to picture this stuff, a kilometer of it was mineralized. When we just think about the dimensions of Valeriano for a second here, it's like 1.4 kilometers long that we've drilled so far, a kilometer high and almost a kilometer wide. Put that in context in terms of the size of what that is in terms of like an urban center. Like, that's the things that we're looking for. Like, these are exciting things to be looking for.
This has presented a clear investment opportunity and attracted premium shareholders in the legendary Pierre Lassonde and Agnico Eagle, by some metrics the world's best gold producer, and now a strategic holder of ATEX. While Ben will need to lead the delivery of Valeriano, in much the same way as it takes a village to raise a child, this deposit won't fulfill its potential without supporting professionals that match its class. And in this respect, the ATEX team is as rich as the ore body. At executive level, Ben is supported by in-country General Manager, Chile VP and Sustainability Lead Felipe Machado Pinheiro, a multilingual executive with 2 decades of management experience focused on sustainability. A Doctor of Economics, one of Felipe's core functions is to ensure ESG best practice at Valeriano remains central to the ATEX business strategy.
Like we have four values, and two of them are really aligned, like on transparency and collaboration. So if you know that that's the way you're going to react when you have a problem, like it's much faster and it's much easier when you have an issue, because you are going to have issues. I mean, it's impossible to work. I mean, in any industry I have worked, you're always going to have issues with the community, environmental issues. The thing is, like, what is the basis of trust that you have to be able to tackle these problems, and how aligned you are inside to tackle these problems. So if you have the basis of trust and you are aligned internally, half of the problem is solved. Then it's about just deciding what are we going to do.
Supporting in BD and capital markets is former analyst and seasoned IR professional Armin Atwell, whose previous experience with large corporates points to the direction of ATEX.
So I think we're continuing to see this deposit, this story play out. There's more tons, there's better grades, a better, higher quality project, and we're leading the way in, for what ultimately will be a copper district, a very important copper district, especially at a time when there's very few quality projects that are out there that have a line of sight to production, and there is going to be a significant deficit in the copper market.
The most recent addition, CFO Eli Jashinsky, has racked up enviable credentials negotiating and executing a range of high-value M&A and financing deals, experience becoming more relevant as Valeriano and ATEX grows in status.
The way I look at ATEX from a finance point of view, it's a story of really two potential mines, right? You've got one mine on top, which is very high grade, high quality, which essentially can be accessed for for a reasonable price and with reasonable technical limitations, and could be in production in a relatively short period when that decision is actually made. The money that would be generated from that mine would finance the building of the second mine that sits beneath, which, based on what I've been told, could have a potentially 100-year life, right? Which is a generational asset for anyone.
The executive team is rounded out by Exploration Director Christine Reynau, a geologist of 25 years experience trained across Latin America and Africa. Meanwhile, the board guiding Ben and his team has been strengthened over time by industry heavyweights Chris Pierre and Rick McCreary, alongside leadership guru Jamil Cruz. But of particular relevance are Chairman Craig Nelson and fellow director Alejandro Wood, who, along with their rare mining pedigree, have a deep familiarity with Valeriano, having been with the project throughout its most recent iteration. Craig has had a personal hand in taking at least 10 projects from resource through to production over his 40 years in the mining industry, and was responsible for not only bringing Ben into ATEX, but for the introduction of Valeriano to Pierre Lassonde and another legendary miner and investor, Ross Beatty.
You've worked on some exceptional projects in your career, Craig. How does this compare at this stage with some of the success stories you've been involved with?
Absolutely the best, hands down. 50 years in the exploration business, this is the best project I've been involved in. And when you think about it, when you think about drilling 2,000 meter holes, starting at 4,400 meters in the Andes, and almost every one of those holes being successfully completed and hitting potentially ore grade mineralization, it's an exceptional project. I haven't been involved in one like this.
Ale is a former executive director of mining sustainability advocacy group CESCO and has handled external affairs for BHP's base metal division, and before that the Escondida JV company. Her approach to ESG is aligned with Felipe's and is evident in ATEX's approach.
And what we're always promoting among the team is for everyone to think that we're here for the long term. So everything we do is not to get a permit to do something, but it's to build a strong and reciprocal and for the long term. So we have to think of the valley in 10 years' time or in 15 years' time. That's what we're working for. We're not working for the short term.
Valeriano couldn't ask for much more from a host jurisdiction. Chile remains the undisputed copper capital of the world with production of circa 5.25 million tonnes, almost twice as much as its next closest rivals in the DRC and Peru. Valeriano is a polymetallic porphyry system typical of the primary copper porphyry deposits concentrated in Western Latin America and occurring within a roughly north-south trending Miocene to early Pliocene metallogenic belt. The project area belongs to a premium postcode along that so-called porphyry superhighway. To the north is the Maricunga belt that hosts giants including Collahuasi, Chuquicamata, and Escondida. The El Indio belt to the south is home to copper royalties such as Los Palambras, Los Broncos, and El Teniente. Valeriano, El Encierro, and Codelco's Torrente property are helping define what is emerging as a new copper district between those two porphyry thoroughfares.
What makes like Chile so spectacular is when you get these like Escondida or Collahuasi or Andina like clusters. And I think when you see at 10, if I look into my crystal ball and I see 10 years of exploration going into this district, you know, you've got Torrente with Codelco, El Encierro with Antofagasta. We've got another block up there that might have something of interest on it as well, and Valeriano, and I think there's probably a couple more things to explore for around Valeriano regionally. This becomes spectacular, and this really starts to have that cluster flavor, and the clusters are what drive the spectacular like you know, endowment around mining districts in Chile and Peru. Like this is the dream.
A Phase 1 RC drill program at Valeriano in 2021 testing the shallow oxide gold epithermal was followed by 2022 Phase 2 program to pursue the porphyry potential, previous owner Hochschild identified in 2013 but didn't chase. A headlining intercept of 1,160 metres, grading 0.78% copper equivalent from 802 metres, increased the mineralised extent by 200 metres to the southwest, which also pushed out 200 metres to the northeast. Phase 3 started in 2022 and continued into 2023, expanding the mineralised footprint, identifying another mineralised trend and allowing an inferred 1.41 billion tonne resource grading 0.67% copper equivalent to be published in the December quarter, well and truly putting Valeriano on the radar for investors and potential strategic or industry stakeholders. If exploration work to this point had been about proving scale, the Phase 4 campaign completed over 2024 was defined by grade, and it changed the complexion of what's possible at Valeriano.
Then you fast forward to Phase 4, where we reoriented our perception of what this geological system could be. And again, like following the breadcrumbs, you could see there's a northwest orientation, there's a northeast. You need both of those. The intersection of those two systems is where you get the, you get the dilation, where you get the ability to place these systems. And it's like trying to figure out what the geometry of that is 1,000 meters down, and then figuring it out. And then hole after hole, just seeing more good results coming out. Hole 24. We're going to hole 23 was great, and then like finishing off at the end of Phase 4 with 68 meters at 2%, and just leaving that like tantalizing like cliffhanger there to follow up on Phase 5 was amazing. Yeah.
Phase 5 recently concluded and returned the best results yet from both the breccia system and the porphyry, including 152 metres at 2.12% copper equivalent, 36 metres grading 3.05% copper equivalent, 16 metres of 6.36% copper equivalent with a broader interval of 30 metres of 4.4% copper equivalent, and then 1.22 kilometres grading 0.91% copper equivalent and 1.09 kilometres at 0.81% copper equivalent. The culmination of these results was an updated resource estimate late in the September quarter of nearly 2 billion tonnes at 0.8% copper equivalent, with more than a quarter in the indicated category. With the limits of the deposit still largely undefined, these are the kind of numbers that understandably draw comparisons with the giant porphyry discoveries in Latin America in the 1990s and into the early 2000s. What is building is that cluster thesis Ben referred to. And if that comes together over the next few years, it would clearly be an immense achievement for ATEX, but it would also be of material significance to global copper supply and the world's electrification ambitions. The consistent exploration success and increasing clarity around the evolution of this cluster theory have had a predictable effect on the market. Anyone who followed Pierre Lassonde into the story back in 2021 would have enjoyed a return of more than 2,500%. Anyone who climbed in after the initial resource in 2023 would have made more than 250%. Today, the stock is at $2.70, having ridden the bumps of President Trump's trade policy and taken flight following the resource upgrade. According to independent equity analysts, there are two specific hooks for investors, the first of which is that idea of scale.
In the case of ATEX, they were able to recognize Valeriano. Yes, there was a known epithermal sort of top to it, but looking deeper, they've now really discovered the real prize, which is the porphyry proper itself. And I think the market's caught on to that this is a project of meaningful scale. And you know, when I look at these things, I typically think sort of 1 billion tons in the ground is sort of a starting point to, you know, something being quote unquote meaningful. You know, ATEX very rapidly started to drill Valeriano at depth and put out their initial resource back in 2023 at 1.4 billion tons. So have already established to me that sort of meaningful threshold. And I think the markets realize that as well. And where it gets even more interesting now, since that resource came out, a lot more drilling, a lot more understanding of the geometry around Valeriano and the components within it, namely a higher grade core, which could be a starter point in a mine plan. And so I think the writing's on the wall.
The other factor is the confidence brought by those high profile and strategic shareholders.
Going back to 2021, Pierre Lassonde became a 10% shareholder, which was a vote of confidence. But even before that, the drill results were building with more of a focus on the large-scale sulfide potential. Then the 2023 Porphyry update with a 1.4 billion tonne resource. That was a big step change for the scale of Valeriano. And that was followed by a 2024 strategic investment by Agnico Eagle. So it's been a good news story over the last few years.
Exploration will continue into 2026 and almost certainly through 2027 before ATEX contemplates any sort of economic development study. The focus will be to better understand the strategically important high-grade zones, to find the outer limits of the mineralized area and build confidence in the overall numbers. This should all provide an updraft for the share price. This is not to suggest that Valeriano is all about scale. While it certainly has that on its side and that differentiates it from a lot of projects that are in the market at the moment, the work completed in Phase 4 and that is ongoing in Phase 5 around the high-grade breccia system adds a hugely important dimension to the project around its optionality and ultimately key development economics. That system has so far delivered a series of high-grade intercepts, including the 152-metre hit grading 2.12% mentioned earlier, encountered above the main porphyry zone and approaching the levels of the valley floor. Should the system hang together, it would provide the antidote to any concerns about an unpalatable capex bill for a direct approach on that deeper porphyry.
The nice thing about having this higher grade breccia is it's going to potentially allow ATEX or whoever develops this to go in and maybe more selectively mine that zone first, maximize payback, sort of get their feet under them, and then think about a bigger block cave at depth in the more porphyry proper mineralization below the breccia. So almost like it allows for almost a sort of a two-stage development.
Based on relevant analogies, ATEX could theoretically build a 3 to 5 million tonne per annum long-haul open stoping operation, with 2% copper equivalent ore worth about $200 per tonne in situ, and standard operating costs for this style of operation at about $60 to $70 plus royalties. The breccia system will provide payback within 2 years. Access to the breccia-hosted mineralisation would take advantage of the varied local topography, with one option to reach the deposit using a tunnel from the valley floor levels, in an operation analogous to the massive El Teniente operation. This would bypass the need for expensive shaft-sinking development up front. It should be clarified that the Valeriano main porphyry isn't as deep as drill results imply. Though many of the headlining intercepts start from around 1,000 metres, ATEX is drilling from the top of a ridge at 4,200 metres above sea level to get on top of the ore body.
we are actually looking at a scenario where it might even daylight above the valley floor. So from the valley into the breccias, pretty straightforward, beautiful little underground mine like you'd have anywhere else in the world. Then you think about the bigger picture with the porphyry potential. The way the philosophy around that is find the lowest possible point of infrastructure, point of elevation you can within 10 kilometers of the project, and put your access in there, and that's how this is done. So I think elevation, like at the hole, makes it challenging from an exploration perspective, but not from an ultimate production perspective.
The picture emerging at Valeriano is impressive. The foundation has been established, the potential is clear, and the opportunities for staged development with near-term payback gives the project a unique advantage. This has not gone unnoticed, and already Agnico Eagle has taken a strategic position. In a crowded neighbourhood full of copper-hungry majors, other approaches are inevitable, and given the size of the build, it could be argued Valeriano would need to be in the care of one such major.
So if the project ends up being too big for ATEX and needs a larger group to develop, Antofagasta would be the natural buyer in our view. At the same time, Agnico is a shareholder, is on the shareholder register, and Codelco, you mentioned, it's not far away. So it's certainly not a one-horse race, but ultimately the view is that the project is going to be too big for a junior company to develop, and that this is a takeout candidate in our view.
Phased development could also leave the door open for ATEX to become a mine builder, and its share price trajectory certainly suggests by the time a capex invoice is due, the company may no longer be in the junior end of the market and will be more than capable of finding the equity component of a construction bill.
I honestly think in mining, the opportunity for true synergy is before anything actually gets built. I mean, you look at Escondida and how you got BHP, you got 4 or 5 players there, Kolwezi, 3 or 4 players there. These giant projects, there's space for people to de-risk, de-risk the infrastructure, to partner, and especially on something like Valeriano, where we found Valeriano and El Zero. There might be another 2 or 3 of these that get found over time. All of those should share one set of infrastructure that links it to the coast and does all the things that needs to be done. That ultimately means having conversations look what Barrick did with Turquoise Ridge with Newmont. You can get at this point of the project incredible synergies and de-risk everyone's projects when you can actually consolidate these and put a consortium together to develop a district.
But we're in danger of getting carried away, as industry commentators have done with many projects that have gone on to become cautionary tales rather than mines. And so with the scale of the opportunity and angles on development at Valeriano being genuinely humbling, it's important to recognise that it's not without its risks. The project remains some 4 kilometres above sea level in the remote Andes in an area of the Porphyry superhighway that has seen relatively little development. This carries logistical difficulties. The project, even if phased, will be large and carry technical challenges. And as with all mining projects all over the world, permitting will be sensitive. Ensuring Valeriano fulfills its potential will need strong, competent and informed leadership. That leadership will ultimately determine Valeriano's fate. And so we must turn our attentions back to Ben. There are a number of hats that you have to wear as a junior CEO. Storyteller, sustainability champion, and it helps if you're a capital markets native. You need to show technical competency and communication skills, and you have to be able to build a team around you. Though the list of demands on Ben is extensive, some would arguably say that a CEO's primary role is to articulate and sell the story to the market, and so we'll start there.
Do investors like Ben? I think so. I think Ben has a really good rapport with people. He's easy to get along with. He's transparent. He's honest. And what he teaches us in the company is we want to remain credible.
It's kind of a rare thing to find in its space, where you have a geologist that, loves the rocks, that's important, that's great, but also understands the capital markets side. And Ben does bring that to the table, and uniquely he brings it with a lot of enthusiasm.
He's got good leadership skills. He doesn't come across as a promoter. He doesn't come across as somebody who's just trying to hype the market. He knows what he's talking about. He's got clear ideas, and they come across well.
The other key attribute Ben will need to demonstrate is a practical grasp on all things ESG.
I see in Ben the new generation of leaders that mining need in terms of learning that water quality of air, or how people behave while they go through the land of people that have lived in that territory for centuries, as something absolutely necessary for enabling mining in the 21st century.
To have a CEO that that puts sustainability like in the center of the business strategy, and also to work with me side by side here in Chile and try to be as present and to understand the local reality like he is. I think it's fundamental for the success of the business.
One stakeholder who has watched Ben since his arrival at ATEX, been exposed to more successful leaders than most others, and enjoyed more triumphs as a leader in mining than most, is industry legend and major shareholder Pierre Lassonde.
Since Ben has come on board, he's surrounded himself with great people. And I think it's the hallmark of a great CEO.
This was endorsed by the most recent high-profile addition to the ATEX management team, CFO Eli Tashinsky.
I'll be honest, the first thing was the shareholder registry. Pierre Lassonde and Agnico Eagle, having names like that, which are incredibly technically savvy and have a long history of success in the space. The second thing, honestly, was the board. These are all very accomplished individuals that I felt lent themselves very well to a project of this scale and nature.
And when we asked Pierre about Ben's single most important talent,
he knows how to translate a complicated geological term in fairly simple term for the shareholders. He lives, breathes, the project, the people around him, and when he communicates, you can see his enthusiasm. You can see the warmth. He really warms up, and he is genuine in everything. And that's one of the traits that's sometimes not valued as much, but it's as CEO, you've got to be able to communicate your enthusiasm for a project. You've got to be able to communicate, your hopes, your dreams, but also sometimes the more difficult part of it.
Valeriano still needs more exploration and will take some developing. Should it become a construction project, it'll be a big one and an expensive one, but it's a prize worth chasing. The resource upgrade took Valeriano to the precipice of 2 billion tonnes with increasingly strong grades. And just as importantly, it has continued the evolution of the deposit, fundamentally wrapping some broader numbers around the high-grade breccia and climbing nature of that system towards the valley floor, demonstrating the potential for a cheaper, easier to access and phased approach with rapid payback from a startup project on the way to that massive, decades-long opportunity. So what we wanted to know was how Ben thinks and how those around him see him. And what we've learned is that he has overwhelmingly impressed with his technical foundation, his communication and his capital market skills, along with his contagious passion for Valeriano, the local community, and what it could mean for not just that community, but the country itself, and of course, ATEX shareholders. And in that context, I feel justified in saying that Ben has earned the final word.
This is something that screams to be explored. There's so much more to find here. This is something that can make a huge difference in terms of the copper supply in the world on a consolidated basis over the next 10 to 15 years, and be a real source of underground mine, kind of greener, more mechanized, more automated, next world, next generation, mines in the future. That is compelling. That is exciting.